Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Wednesday's Wonder Why Lunch and Learn presentation. We have with us today Jennifer Griggs, who is a dignity and forgiveness coach. And Jennifer is going to be speaking to us about, let me make sure I get this right. We are going to be talking about dignity, forgiveness, and the body for women over 40. I think this is such an important presentation. Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us here today. Let me hand over to you. Tell us who you are and why you do what you do, and how the importance of dignity and forgiveness for women over 40, for perimenopause and menopause, and the road forward for us.
Well, I am just so excited to be here. Happy Wednesday, everybody, and so honored to be part of your community. I am a medical oncologist with a specialty in breast cancer care. So I've taken care of the body for many years, for over 30 years. Mm-hmm. And I also am a coach for people who've been hurt at work and want to repair in a way that doesn't perpetuate harm. So for leaders in the healthcare system and scientists who work and want to lead in a new way. They want to lead in a way that honors the dignity
and
of the lead.
Let me just also say that this is a very private, personal, vulnerable kind of presentation. So if you're watching this live, or if you're watching on LinkedIn, YouTube, or on my Facebook page, please come to my Facebook group, Moving and Reshaping Club for Women 40 Plus. It's a private group, and that is where you can ask questions that other people won't be able to see because it is a private group, and Jennifer will come and answer your questions for you. So if you're watching this live in the group, I am going to be checking my phone, so feel free to pop questions and comments there for Jennifer. And if they are relevant, we will share them. But otherwise, Jennifer, will you be able to pop in and answer people's questions?
Of course, it would be an honor. It would be wonderful.
So if you're watching in the Facebook group, please let us know that you can see us and that you can hear us. If you're watching on LinkedIn too, just give a thumbs up. And I am going to feature. Let me pin Jennifer, and I will hand on over to you.
Well, wonderful. I want to just share that I came to this work because something happened to me at work, and something that hurt me deeply. And the way I responded in retrospect shows me how disconnected I was from my body. If I had known how to experience what I was going through in my body, I think I could have healed more quickly. And so I refuse to believe that we have to continue to suffer after indignities. I think that all of us have the ability to heal. I think I'll start with talking about what is dignity, because people often confuse it with respect. So respect is something we earn. Dignity is something we're born with. So respect is acquired. We have to, demonstrate that we're worthy of respect. Dignity we're born with. So a brand new baby has dignity. And in fact, that brand new baby has as much dignity as somebody we think of as being in power or somebody with stature. Nobody has more or less dignity than another person. It's our birthright. We don't have to hustle for it, and we don't have to earn it.
So important, right? And let us know if that resonates with you. Dignity is your birthright. Give me a thumbs up in the comments.
This is really important, and I will come back to this in a moment, just as a reminder. So we can, over the years I've been doing this, people need to be reminded that they have as much dignity as somebody else, and equally important, those we deal with have as much dignity as we do. It's not based on how we act. Now, we can violate our dignity, and we can violate the dignity of others, and we can have our dignity violated. And that's what I'll turn to in just a moment. But I want to share the work of Donna Hicks. She's at Harvard. She's a professor at Harvard. And through interviews she's done all over the world, she's identified 10 elements of dignity. I'll go through each of these and then I'll summarize them all at the end. It's a little bit like naming the seven dwarves. You can't be sure you remember all of them, but I'm pretty good at this. So the first one is acceptance of identity. So as I go through these, think about what that looks like and feels like to you. And maybe you can think of a time you were hurt and you'll understand which element of dignity was violated. Then we'll talk about what it feels like in our bodies to have our dignity violated and the ways we know our dignity has been violated, or if that's too strong a word for you, I also say bruised. If people don't want to say their dignity's been violated because somebody interrupted them in a conversation, you can say it was bruised or, tweaked a little bit. But the first thing is acceptance of identity. So we all bring a host of identities to our interactions at work, at home, in our relationships, in our community with our friend group, our first family and our chosen families. And, think about in work, what it's like to have your identity accepted. So we have different ways we show up. We dress a certain way, we talk a certain way. Some of us are neurodivergent and we might have differences in how we pay attention to things. We may be introverts, we're much more shy. Our identity includes our race, our gender, our age, our ethnicity, our language, our sexual orientation and gender identity. When those are accepted, when our identities are accepted, what does that feel like? Well, it feels really good. And what does it feel like when those are violated, when we're not accepted? That's a violation of dignity. The next element is inclusion, very closely related, but this includes being at the center of your decisions that are made about you and for you, that you want to be included in those. It's so interesting to know that when we're excluded, it's humiliating. And the same parts of the brain light up when we're socially excluded or humiliated, as do with physical pain.
Wow. Okay, that is huge. That is huge. Can you say that again?
I'm going to say it again.
Comment below if you agree and if this resonates with you. Yeah.
So if you are excluded at work or you're humiliated, you might be teased by somebody in power. You can be teased by people who report to you, and that can be humiliating. If you're called out for a mistake you've made, the same parts of your brain light up as do with physical pain. Mm-hmm. So it's a profound impact on our brains, on our nervous system when we're excluded. Humiliation is a form of exclusion, right? It's othering us and saying, basically, we don't belong. A lot of people who say they have imposter syndrome, really, it's not about what you know or don't know. It's that feeling of belonging. So I think imposter syndrome bumps up against this inclusion element of dignity. The third and closely related is safety, physical safety and psychological safety. So we need to feel that it's okay for us to voice our opinion. It's okay for us to be authentic in the workplace and at home with our first families. We need to feel safe. You can see how those are related: acceptance of identity, inclusion, and safety, physical and psychological safety. The next group of elements, there are three that I group under that feeling of being seen. Have you ever been in a group of people and somebody says, I feel seen? Mm-hmm. Or you are so comfortable in a community because you feel seen. What are the things that make us feel seen? Well, the first is understanding, having our stories heard, being told by somebody, I understand, even if they don't agree. Just to say, to be understood and have a chance to tell your story is the understanding element. The other is recognition for our contributions. And I would also say for our striving. So if we try something and we fail, to have that striving recognized. We know with our children, if they do something really great, we try to, quote, catch them doing something right. What if we catch them trying? You really gave that a good try, because that's how we grow, trying and failing. We actually learn more from our failures than we do our successes, which often happen to be by accident. So what a wonderful thing to be recognized for trying, even if we don't succeed. This is how science, this is how medicine pushes forward. If we only did experiments we knew would work, where would the innovation be, right? We have to be willing to fail 80% of the time. That's real progress. And to be recognized for our striving, I think, is such an important piece. And then the other is acknowledgement. So the three elements of being seen are understanding, recognition, and acknowledgement, which isn't just being recognized, but is being acknowledged verbally. That's to be, on my team, I think that they've had a lot of acknowledgement, but when I acknowledge them again, it's very clear to me we can't acknowledge people enough. It's got to be sincere. We don't just want to pour on praise when it's meaningless, but to acknowledge what people have done and how that contributes to you personally and to the team and its mission at work, at home, is amazing. Not just a quick thank you. Thanks a lot. That was great. But true, deep acknowledgement. So those are the three elements of being seen. So we've talked about identity, inclusion, psychological safety. Then there's understanding, recognition, and acknowledgement. And the next four elements, I think, relate to justice. The first one is being given the benefit of the doubt. And that really could go under being seen as well. It sort of straddles the being seen elements and the justice elements. And this is a bit of a sticky one because we know that impact matters more than intent. So when we've been hurt, maybe somebody didn't mean to hurt us, but the impact was we were embarrassed, we were wounded, we were humiliated, we didn't feel understood. The element of benefit of the doubt is assuming people are acting with integrity. And even though it can be hard to do this for others, I just want you to think about a time when you weren't given the benefit of the doubt, when your intentions were twisted. That's a violation of your dignity. So this is something we want really badly, and it's a little harder for us to give. And I think we need to be careful when we talk about people who have been historically marginalized, to be really careful not to say, well, their heart was in the right place. Because when you talk about systemic violations of dignity, their hearts probably weren't in the right place. So I know this is one of those thornier ones, but I want you to think about a time you were given the benefit of the doubt and a time you weren't, to understand this element. The next one is autonomy. We want to be given autonomy to make decisions at work. We know children, when they're 3, they start saying, I do it myself. And I think I see this a lot with my patients who have their families maybe over functioning for them when they're going through treatment. Maybe they've had surgery or they're undergoing chemotherapy, and people over function and overdo. So my patients have told me how annoying it is. Oh, you see this a lot with young adults where they have cancer and their parents won't let them do the things that make them adults. So it reproduces some of that autonomy at the teen years. I think when we are living with somebody who struggles with addiction and we rescue them, we're violating the autonomy element of dignity. So if you have a child who struggles with substance use and you keep rescuing them, first of all, we know that doesn't help and they won't learn what it is they need to change. But I also think it's a violation of their dignity. And I think this is a great vocabulary if you want to start setting limits and say, I don't want to violate your autonomy. We see this with older people who are elderly, who don't want to be a burden. I think when people say that, they're speaking to their need for autonomy.
Yes.
If that makes sense. So I think people who are young, people who are old, people struggling with illness, as much as we can give them their autonomy, same at work, this is so key. So the next one is fairness. The element of fairness means that we are treated equally according to agreed upon rules. And we know when we look at policing, maldistributed policing or behaviors of people in authority towards people with less authority, that fairness is violated. I won't go into this much more because I'm going to have you think about times in a moment that one of these, that you were hurt, and see if you can identify which elements were wounded. And then the last one is accountability. This is one of the hardest elements, because when we make a mistake, we feel bad about it. We feel shame. And so it's easy for us to shy away from accountability. But I have to say, with maturity, as leaders, as parents, if we can be accountable for our decisions and our mistakes, we are truly living into a level of mature dignity, even when it's hard. And I have to say, if you practice having these crucial conversations in which you take accountability, you actually can start to welcome them, because they take your relationships to next level. So let's say we want to change a behavior, we want to live in a more healthy way, and then we come up with all these excuses for why we're not. I want to pin this to the body. So I say, I'm going to, let's say I'm going to meditate every day, and I want to build in a habit. And then I realize I haven't done that. And I say, well, it's because my husband and I are playing spelling bee in the morning. Okay. And, where's the accountability? If I hand it off to other people, I'm actually not living with dignity. It's a little example. It's just one I came up with off the top of my head. But I know as a leader at work, when I can say I messed up, I should have done this differently, the strength of the relationships I have at work is much stronger. And same with my kids. If I take accountability for a mistake, I have 2 daughters, 22 and 24. If I take accountability and then say what I'm going to do differently, how I'm going to repair that, I know that we're closer. So those are the 10 elements of dignity. I'm going to go through them again one more time. Acceptance of identity, inclusion, safety, both physical and psychological, understanding, recognition, and acknowledgement, being given or giving others the benefit of the doubt, fairness, autonomy, and accountability. And as you've been listening, is there a particular element of dignity you're really fond of? Somebody I met with last week, hers is accountability. And for me, it's understanding, especially with my children or with my husband. If there's a point of conflict, it's usually around understanding, just being heard, being able to finish your story without people interrupting. And we know that we often don't need problem solving. We just want to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
We just want to be told, I understand that was hard. So how do we know our dignity's been violated? So we can have the thought, but I think if we can tune into our bodies, it's a feeling of a gut punch, is what it is. It's a gut punch. We feel dignity violations viscerally. And I want to encourage you, as you hear these elements and you think about something that hurt you, to zone in on your body. Where do you feel it in your body? Emotions are held in our body, right? That's the definition of emotions. It's not just a feeling with a word. We actually feel it in our body. And I'll talk about forgiveness in a moment. But unforgiveness is something we hold in our bodies. Through rumination, reliving that event, we hold these feelings of unforgiveness in our body. And forgiveness is a shift in emotional experience. So think about your body and when you're hurt, where you feel that. So I mentioned I was hurt at work. It was 5 years ago on Saturday. And I remember being so disconnected from my body that I just continued to ruminate, what if they should? And the other way we know is through shame. Why is that? Why do we feel shame when our dignity's been violated? Well, I promised I would remind you what dignity is. Dignity is our worth, our inherent worth. Shame is the message that we're not worthy.
Wow. Yes. Yes. So powerful.
When our dignity's been violated, then it makes sense. We've been given the message that we don't have worth.
Mm-hmm.
And that equates to shame. So guilt is I made a mistake. Shame is I am a mistake. And it's those feelings of shame and that meta message of I am a mistake that leads to people going to the dark place. If you hear people on podcasts tell their story, or you hear a story, you see things on the news, you hear people talk about the dark place, they're really talking about shame and questioning their worth. And this can lead to feelings that they don't belong on this earth. And that can lead to suicidal ideation. So if we think about somebody whose dignity's been violated, why would they become suicidal? Why would they go to that dark place? Because her dignity is our worth and shame says you're not worthy. It's a natural consequence of that. So let me just check in and see if there are any questions, and maybe encourage everybody to put your hands on your belly and just take a couple deep breaths, because we're getting kind of close to the bone here.
Yeah. I loved what you said about that acknowledgement that your dignity has been validated, being the punch in the gut, right? And it happens so quickly. Often we're caught off guard. We don't know what to do about it. Yes. In the moment.
It's
so maybe
really,
you can tell us a little bit about, like, or is that something you're coming to? I don't want to jump the gun.
No, tell me what you were going to ask.
I was going to ask, in that moment where you're feeling the okay, that all those emotions coming from the solar plexus, what is your advice for that moment? And is it that moment of shame, of the verbal words being said to you? Is it how you react in that moment that is going to set the trajectory of that incident?
Yes. So when our dignity is violated, we have feelings of anger, shame, grief, fury, rage. You can see colors. You feel that visceral gut punch. You can feel shame. And what happens next is where I feel that dignity consciousness can help us act in a way that doesn't further violate our dignity or that of others, and keeps us connected to people. Mm-hmm. I think connection in our communities is what we all long for. So I do believe knowing to be able to say my dignity was violated just now, we can get faster at recognizing that and naming it for ourselves. We can figure out what heck elements were violated later, but to just be able to say that gut punch was my dignity being violated.
But to acknowledge that to yourself, to acknowledge what is actually going on in the situation.
Right. Yes. And once you start to see it, I can tell you this is like a muscle that develops. Once you start to see it in other situations, like start to see it when you look at violence and war, and you start to see other people interacting. You hear a story from your kids, start to see it and pause. Hit the pause button when you hear somebody else tell a story and ask yourself, was this a dignity violation? And if so, which elements? It's rarely one. It's which elements, right? If you're not given the benefit of the doubt, it's often understanding, or it's not fair. There's many elements at once, but it really has helped the people I work with to be able to piece out what happened. And the next thing I'm going to talk about is the temptations we fall for when our dignity is violated. And then I'll talk about the alternatives. So we are hardwired to notice when our dignity is violated. You can see this. This is what starts wars. Somebody takes the territory of another group, and that leads to people lashing out. So the one we think about the most often is lashing out. A kid takes a toy from another kid and they smack them. And that's the lashing out temptation when our dignity is violated. There are others that I think are harder to recognize, but they're equal violations of dignity. They include repelling feedback. So your dignity has been violated. Somebody's giving you some feedback, and because it's done in such a way that violates your dignity or it triggers shame, you don't hear the feedback. And often you can come around later and be more receptive to the feedback. But I think understanding that your first impulse is to repel it makes a lot of sense, to see that these are automatic reactions. Another one is to stay in an unsafe relationship. So we actually, when our dignity is violated, that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, I think it's debatable whether fawn is a reaction to trauma but staying in an unsafe relationship actually further violates our dignity. And if you think about the whole ecosystem of a family or community or workplace, it actually violates the other people as well, because it doesn't affect change. Now, I do want to say, if you are physically not safe and you're in an intimate relationship where you're not safe, leaving relationships actually can pose a threat to you. So I just want to acknowledge that not everybody can leave immediately. Staying in an unsafe relationship sometimes is a survival mechanism. But if you think about it from the framework of dignity, it can be helpful to see, if you want to frame why you're leaving to protect your dignity. Dignity is so essential and so vulnerable. Others, avoiding conflict is a way of violating our dignity even further. Other things are to not take accountability for your part.
Sorry, can you just go back to that one? Are you talking about like passive aggressive?
Oh, passive aggressive. Yes, where we, avoiding conflict through passive aggressive behaviors. I hope your viewers and listeners know what passive aggressive means, but it's a way of being really aggressive without actually being assertive, yes. Right? It's a way of, it's snide comments, it's sarcasm. Sarcasm, the word comes from to wound, and sarcasm is a way we can lash out and avoid real, true conflict, generative, creative conflict that changes things for the better. Yeah, that's a really good point, that passive aggressive, all of us fall prey to that. We have temptations. That's why these are temptations. I think to recognize it is further violating our dignity and that of the person we're in conflict with is helpful.
Right. And sorry, just thinking of the people in my life and the things that I like to go to, right? Then there's also the martyrdom.
Yes, so the last two you're going to love.
I think women are really good at that.
Yes, so thriving in our victimhood is a true violation, where that becomes our identity. And we thrive because we are victims. Now, if you've been hurt and it's been a long time, this is work to come out of victimhood and take back your power, because it can become our identity. I see this in people with chronic illness. I see this in people who've been hurt at work, where this becomes their story. It's their theme song. I was hurt, I was hurt, I was hurt. And you see a host of grievances that's all people can talk about. I imagine an aunt who comes to every dinner conversation, Thanksgiving, Christmas, all the holidays, and all she can talk about is her ex-husband who cheated on her with her best friend, and he died 10 years ago. She's clearly thriving in her victimhood and handing off her dignity. She's sort of outsourcing her dignity. So that's that martyrdom, I think. It's that thriving in that victimhood. The other thing, my favorite go-to strategy is righteous indignation. How could they have? I never would have.
Oh, all-time favorite.
Yeah. And the problem with that is we actually could.
Yes.
Therefore, for the grace of God go I. Could I have said something that's stupid or harmful to somebody else? And so that righteous indignation does two things. It repels us from seeing our role, and it keeps us from seeing how we have done this to other people. So I'll tell you, my parents really wanted me to follow a particular profession. How have I perpetuated that with my children? But I would never do that with my kids. Well, my kids have gotten some messages. I know they have. They're both perfectionists. So, I actually could do that to somebody else. I think we see this a lot with people who want to be allies. When we talk about racism or transphobia, people hear something incredibly unskillful that's been said. I would never say that. Well, actually, a lot of the things we do as allies are harmful. So I think it's important to recognize that self-righteousness is a temptation to fall prey to when our dignity is violated or we see somebody else's. And I think this is where we need to have that humility and to realize that that is a temptation and to try to resist it.
Mm-hmm.
The last two temptations are gossip to get intimacy. And gossip, 80% of gossip is positive, but 20% is harmful. And gossip that we engage in to feel close to other people when we've been hurt and to get their support is actually pretty harmful. Most to us, it's most harmful to us because that becomes our brand, what people say about us when we're not in the room. People don't want to be around us when we're gossiping, even if they engage. It's that yucky feeling, that kind of sick feeling you get later when you've engaged in gossip. And I think understanding it as a normal temptation after our dignity's been violated is helpful. And then to recognize it as a further violation of our dignity and that of the person we're gossiping about. I'm guilty of this and have great regrets about this. And then the last one is to outsource our dignity to other people. Of course, we all need recognition and acknowledgement, but if we can't know our own inherent worth and we outsource our dignity to other people, can you see how that drains your energy and actually doesn't remind you of your own inherent worth? So here's a reminder that dignity is your inherent worth. It's your birthright. You don't have to hustle for it. Nobody has more or less dignity than another person.
Mm-hmm. So powerful, really. Can you tell us a little bit more about, we have a question about asking if you can talk a little bit more about violations of dignity in the workplace and how to handle that, whether it's, as you said, like coming from a senior, coming from your peers, or coming from a junior, because I think in these relationships on which our kind of livelihood depends, on which it's our career, which is usually our passion, and it's not people who are like you can say your family members will always come back, hopefully, no matter what you say to them, but it gets more delicate in the work situation. So if you could give us some advice on how to handle that.
I would love to. So I think the first step is naming it. My dignity's been violated. Naming the elements of dignity. There's something about naming something that helps us tame it, right? If we name it, we can tame it. And it's not this, I think when our dignity is violated, whether it's at work or not, we can actually get really dissociated. We can get things can white out, get fuzzy.
Especially in the moment, right?
Yes,
it's almost like an out-of-body experience. You can't believe what's happening to you.
Yes. I think being able to take that static, that noise, that dissociation.
You mean in the moment?
Well, in the moment with practice.
Yes.
I think with practice, but I think even after, usually it's not a one-time thing. And if it is a one-time thing, then I think understanding it and having this vocabulary can be very helpful in understanding why it hurt. I think so many times we're hurt, but we don't know what it was. Was it safety, inclusion, acceptance of identity, recognition, fairness in the workplace? There's so many times where all of these elements can be violated because systems are set up where powerful people are rewarded and not held accountable. Mm-hmm. And bad behavior gets perpetuated. And at work, people in power tend to close ranks behind those in power. So, I think if we can develop dignity consciousness in our organizations and have this vocabulary, that helps. So naming it, I think, is key. Not just it's an element, it's dignity, but what particular elements. And then one way to do that is to focus on what it feels like when that element is honored. So if you're in a healthy relationship with a coworker, what element of your dignity is honored? If you have somebody in HR who's been an ally, what element of dignity, understanding, inclusion, fairness, benefit of the doubt when they hear your side of the story? I made a mistake, accountability, having those people and knowing I think we need to tell stories about what it feels like to have our dignity honored as well as violated. If we just focus on what it feels like when it's broken, we're not reinforcing what it feels like when it's honored. So I think as a culture, on my team at work, we tell stories of when our core values were lived out. And so many of those are elements of dignity, understanding, recognition, acknowledgement, fairness. Then the other thing to do is to look at the temptations and make sure that you don't fall prey to those, or if you do in the moment, to stop. Stop gossiping, stop outsourcing your dignity, stop avoiding conflict. You don't have to do it alone. With whom can you have a generative conflict conversation? Can we use this conflict to generate something good? It's scary. Staying silent, though, further violates your dignity. But I think avoiding gossip, avoiding righteous indignation are two things that I would suggest in the workplace. And then figuring out, are you safe in this relationship? If you're not safe at work, I know it's easy to say you should just leave, but I think when something doesn't feel right and you feel in your body that sense of dread as you go into work or think about work or talk about work with your family, starting to lay the groundwork to leave an unsafe relationship is something to consider. I know that may not be what the question was about, but in the forgiveness work, we talk about, do you reconcile or do you release the relationship? Mm-hmm. And at work, it's the same thing. Do we stay and make it work? Maybe changing our behavior, because that's the only thing we can change is ourselves. Mm-hmm. Recognizing what you can change and what you can't, and having the wisdom to know the difference, right, is a really important part of safety and also change, managing change in the workplace. We can only really change ourselves and how we show up. So showing up with dignity is so important. So what does showing up with dignity look like in addition to, or instead of maybe just those temptations? It's so easy to say, don't do. So what do you do? Well, Donna Hicks, who I mentioned earlier, she wrote a book called Dignity, makes the distinction between the me and the I. So as an English major, we talk about subjects and objects of a sentence. The subject is the I. I do, I respond, I feel. The me is what happened to me. And a lot of the times when we thrive in our victimhood, there's a lot of me. This happened to me. They did this to me, as opposed to I. And we perpetuate this victim mentality and the way we show up in our bodies. We slouch, we don't take good care of ourselves, we shrink. What would it be like to unfold and to be the I of the sentence? I choose, I am, I respond, as opposed to react to what happened to me. It's not too late. If you've been in a relationship where your dignity has continued to be violated, and you're wondering, what do I do now? I've gossiped, I've been self-righteous, I've avoided conflict. There's no better time to start than right now. And that can be with how you sit in your chair. It can be with how you stand and how you walk and how you talk about yourself. Are you hearing the word me, or are you hearing the word I?
Ooh, super powerful. Yes. Right. So, I think, yeah. So that is a major moment, right? And in your mental chatter as well, right? Yeah.
Yes. They interrupted me. They don't understand me. They did this to me. Okay, what about you? So this is interesting. In my work with groups and with clients, we talk about reclaiming your dignity. And out of curiosity, I looked up the word reclaim, and it comes from the verb to call back your hawk in the Old French. To call back your hawk.
Love that.
And a hawk is a symbol of power.
Yes.
When we look at what symbols mean in dreams, a hawk is power. A hawk is an enormous bird. And imagine, if you will, standing on a mountain, and you're deeply connected to the earth. The earth is holding you up, and you're looking out over a valley, and you call back your hawk. You put your arm out, you have a gauntlet because your talons are so powerful, and you're calling back your hawk. Can you hear her? She's in the distance. Can you hear her cry? And as she gets closer, can you hear her wings? And then when she lands on your arm, do you feel your body is powerful, so you can withstand your power coming back to you? But what if we could take this with us into relationships, communities, families, workplaces, where we act as if we have a hawk with us. We've called back our power. We're not outsourcing it. And what happens with people I work with is they start to feel, they see that the dignity is theirs, that it always was. That it always was. It might be tender, bruised, broken, but they can call it back. And the thing that really heals us is when we see that the people who hurt us also have dignity.
Yes. Wow. Thank you. This has been just an incredibly, incredibly powerful presentation, right? Dignity is the core of everything. And it's so interesting because, yeah, I'm 53, but I have a 10-year-old. She just turned 11 on Monday, and I drive carpool. And so I am listening to the carpool conversation of grade fives, right? Grade 4 and grade 5, and really so of their little conversation is talking about their violations of dignity.
Yes.
So interesting. And it's interesting to hear how they're managing it and how they're working their way through it. So thank you. You've given me some great tips to interject to the conversations.
We'll start, right? If we can talk with the young people and with children about how to live in a way that honors their dignity and that of others, we could actually see things changing.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So tell us a bit more about the work that you do in this field and how people can find you and work with you.
Well, thank you. I have forgiveness group coaching, which is really based on the work of dignity. And then how do we build ourselves back up so that we're free of past hurts? That's a small group, real safe environment. And we start by writing a love letter to our future selves about what it would feel like to be free of past hurts. Forgiveness is giving up all hope of a better past and hoping for something different in the future. I also have a dignity lab where people who want to live and lead with dignity join in, and we use the foundations of dignity to talk about challenging situations, how we handled it, how we could handle it, how we move forward to improve dignity in our workplaces and in our families. And I also work one-on-one with folks. I have a website, www.jennifergriggs.com. I have free downloadable resources. The periodic table of the elements of dignity is on there.
I love that.
A lot of my folks have it on their fridge and start talking about it often with their daughters at your daughter's age. I can be reached by email too at jennifer@jennifergriggs.com.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, really very, very enlightening presentation. I know this is something that happens to people all the time. We need to find a way through it and acknowledge the power of those feelings and how to cope with them and how to move forward without going into behavior that violates our dignity even further, or as you said, that violates the dignity of others. So thank you so much for coming to join us. If there are any questions, please leave them on LinkedIn or in the Facebook group Moving and Reshaping Club for Women 40 Plus. You can find that on Facebook. Thank you so much for coming to join us, Jennifer.
Sure. It was just terrific to talk with you today.
Wonderful. All the best. Have a great week. Bye.